The studio lights of view illuminated the round table, casting a warm glow as the audience buzzed in anticipation. The show's familiar theme faded and host Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Sunny host took their seats ready for their next guest. Today's segment was different. No movie stars or pop icons, but Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, known for his folksy humor and sharp wit. Kennedy was a familiar face in politics, but this was his first time on a daytime talk show. He had come to discuss a new community initiative in his state aimed at revitalizing small towns through education and job training. It was a kind of uplifting topic that seemed perfect for morning TV, a chance to share a hopeful message with a national audience. Backstage, Kennedy's team had reminded him to keep the conversation light, focus on initiative, and expect a few playful comments from the hosts. The View was famous for its lively discussions, but Kennedy had weathered tougher crowds. As he adjusted his tie and stepped on stage, he carried the calm confidence that had guided him through countless debates. This, he thought, would be just another friendly conversation. The audience applauded as Kennedy walked out, waving and smiling warmly. Dressed in a navy suit with neatly combed silver hair, he projected easy confidence. He shook hands with each host and took his seat as the colorful set gleamed under the studio lights. Whoopi began the interview with her usual warmth. "Senator, we're glad you're here to talk about the great work you're doing in Louisiana," she said. "Tell us about this project and what it means to people back home." Kennedy leaned forward, his southern drawl calm and steady. "Well, Whoopi, I'm just a country boy trying to do some good. This program is about helping small towns get ahead, better schools, job training, and giving folks a chance to build a future without leaving their roots. It's about hope, plain and simple." The audience applauded and the mood was upbeat. Sarah Haynes followed up with a question about funding. Kennedy answered with a mix of humor and clarity, joking that they were pinching pennies tighter than my grandmama at a yard sale. The crowd laughed and even Sunny host smiled. Everything seemed on track until Joy Behar leaned forward. "Well, Senator Kennedy," she began, her tone edged with sarcasm. "This all sounds great, but let's be honest. Isn't this just another politician's pet project to make you look good on TV? How much of this is really about helping people? And how much is about polishing your image?" The question landed hard. The laughter faded and the set grew quiet. Kennedy's expression stayed calm, though his eyes sharpened slightly. Off camera, his aides exchanged worried looks. They had warned him about Behar's confrontational style, but this was more pointed than expected. Kennedy met her gaze. "Joy, you're welcome to your opinion," he replied evenly. "But this isn't about me or my image. It's about folks back home in places like Ruston and Nacho who need real support. We got solid plans, funding, and people making it happen. You're welcome to come to Louisiana and see it yourself." His tone was courteous yet firm, the kind of politeness that carried an edge. But Behar wasn't done. She leaned back with a knowing smile. "Oh, come on, Senator. You've been in politics long enough to know how this goes. You put your name on a feel-good project, get some headlines, and move on. People at home aren't as naive as you think." The audience chuckled nervously, sensing the tension. Whoopi tried to redirect the conversation, asking about the project's next steps. But Bear cut in again, refusing to let go. "No, let's not skip past this," she pressed. "You've got a reputation for those folksy one-liners, but is that all there is? Are you using that charm to cover up that this might just be another photo op?" The studio air grew thick with silence. The light-hearted tone from earlier had vanished, replaced by an unmistakable tension between guest and host. Kennedy's team whispered urgently backstage, one aide wondering aloud if they should alert the producers to step in. But Kennedy remained composed. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, eyes steady on Behar. "Joy," he began evenly, his tone calm but firm. "I'll be honest with you. I've been called many things over the years, some accurate, some not. But I didn't come here to dodge questions or trade jabs. I came to talk about something that actually helps people, not to turn this into a gotcha moment. If you got an issue with me, that's fine. But let's not pretend this is about the people I'm trying to support." The audience responded with a round of applause, a few even cheering at his straightforwardness. But Behar didn't budge. She tilted her head slightly, her voice edged with sarcasm. "Oh, come on, Senator. Spare us the humble routine. You're a politician. Your job is to sell a story. And this talk about helping real people, it's just another chapter in the John Kennedy brand. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." Her words hit hard, not because they were accurate, but because of the satisfaction in her tone, as though she relished exposing what she saw as political theater. Sarah Haynes quickly stepped in, her voice bright but slightly tense, hoping to ease the growing friction. "Okay, let's pause for a moment," Sarah Haynes interjected gently. "Senator, maybe you can explain how this initiative will actually function at the community level." It was an opportunity to steer the discussion back on track. But Behar wasn't ready to let go. She raised her hand, cutting Sarah off. "Hold on, Sarah. I'm not finished," she said, her tone firm and unyielding. "Senator, you talk a lot about helping small towns, but isn't it a little convenient that this project comes up just as you're facing criticism back home? People are questioning your record, and this looks like a distraction. Am I wrong?" The question lingered in the air, sharp and loaded. The audience grew quiet, sensing the tension rising. This was no longer casual conversation. It had turned into a direct challenge. Kennedy's jaw tightened slightly, the first visible sign of irritation. He had handled tough debates in Senate hearings before, but this was different. Behar wasn't just disputing his policies. She was questioning his integrity, and doing it with a tone that made it seem personal. Backstage, Kennedy's team exchanged uneasy looks, signaling to producers, but no one in the control booth seemed ready to intervene. The moment hung in suspense. Kennedy took a slow breath, his fingers tapping lightly on the chair's armrest, a subtle show of restraint. "Joy, I'm not sure what you're getting at," he said, his tone steady but firm. "If you're suggesting I'm doing this for political gain, you're mistaken. My career's been about standing up for people who don't have a voice, and this initiative is no different. You want to talk about my record? Fine. But don't claim to know my intentions or what drives me to do this work every day." The crowd broke into applause, this time louder, energized by Kennedy's calm but resolute response. But Behar wasn't letting up. She leaned forward, her voice lowering into a sharp, almost knowing tone. "Oh, Senator, I don't need to know what's in your heart. I've seen enough politicians to recognize the pattern. This man of the people image. You're not fooling anyone. It's getting old, and I'm just wondering when you'll try something different." The comment landed hard, and the studio went silent. The air grew tense as the audience shifted uneasily in their seats. Whoopi stepped in, her tone firm but calm. "All right, let's keep things respectful. Senator, maybe you can share a real example of how this initiative has made an impact." But her attempt to diffuse the situation was overshadowed by the moment. Kennedy's gaze stayed locked on Behar, his usual easygoing expression replaced by one of quiet determination. "Joy," he said slowly, his tone steady. "I came here to talk about something that can genuinely change lives. I didn't come here to be your target practice. If you want a real conversation, I'm all for it. But if this is just about taking shots for entertainment, then maybe I'm not the right guest for this segment." A few audience members clapped, while others exchanged uncertain looks. Behar's smirk faltered briefly at his bluntness before she leaned back with an exaggerated sigh. "Oh, Senator, don't take it personally," she replied. "I'm just asking what viewers are thinking. If you can't handle a little tough questioning, maybe you're in the wrong line of work." The remark hit its mark. Kennedy's fingers stilled, his posture straightened, and his patience visibly thinned. The other hosts glanced at one another, realizing the exchange had gone too far. In the control room, producers debated whether to cut the commercial or let the confrontation play out for ratings. As the segment drew to a close, the tension in the studio was unmistakable. What began as a friendly discussion had turned into a clash of personalities, a test of composure and conviction. The audience leaned in, captivated by the standoff, while Kennedy's team whispered hurriedly backstage, already preparing for potential fallout. Yet Kennedy himself appeared steady, unshaken, and fully composed, his resolve intact despite the storm unfolding around him. He had faced tougher moments before, and he wasn't about to let Joy Behar gain the upper hand. As the camera swept across the set, capturing the uneasy smiles of the hosts and the focused faces of the audience, one thing was certain. This wasn't a typical episode of The View. It had become a confrontation that everyone would be discussing long after broadcast, marking the beginning of an unforgettable exchange. The studio buzzed with tension as the second segment began. The audience was still processing the heated exchange between Senator John Kennedy and Joy Behar. Bright studio lights cast long shadows over a familiar round table where hosts Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, Sunny Hostin, and Behar sat maintaining their composure. Whoopi gripped her note cards a little too tightly. Sarah's polite smile looked forced, while Sunny's expression remained carefully neutral. In the guest chair, Kennedy appeared every bit the seasoned senator, his navy suit crisp, silver hair neatly styled, but there was a new intensity in his eyes. Just offstage, his team whispered among themselves. Phones lighting up as clips from the first segment began circulating online. In the control booth, producers sensed a surge in viewership and chose to let the moment unfold, debating quietly through their headsets whether to step in or let the tension drive the ratings higher. What was supposed to be a simple conversation about Kennedy's Louisiana Community Initiative, a plan focused on education and job training in small towns, had turned into a verbal face-off. The audience, now fully engaged, leaned forward in anticipation of what might come next. Whoopi, determined to regain control, spoke in a measured tone. "We're back with Senator John Kennedy to talk more about his work in Louisiana," she said, her voice calm but cautious. "Senator, let's get into the details of how this initiative actually works. How's it actually helping people on the ground?" Whoopi asked, giving Kennedy a chance to steer the discussion back to his main point. He leaned forward slightly, his familiar southern drawl steady. "Well, Whoopi," he began, "it's about giving people a ladder, not a handout. In towns like Minden, we're funding programs that teach practical skills, welding, coding, nursing, so folks can find good jobs and stay close to home. I met a man last week who used to drive trucks. Now he's repairing wind turbines and earning twice what he made before. That's the kind of progress we're focused on." The audience responded with applause, clearly moved by the story. Sarah Haynes jumped in enthusiastically. "That's impressive, Senator. How do you make sure these opportunities reach everyone who needs them?" Kennedy nodded, explaining the outreach programs with a mix of humor and sincerity. "We go where the talent is," he said, smiling. "Like my uncle used to hunt quail quietly but with purpose." The crowd laughed, and for a moment, the mood relaxed. But Joy Behar wasn't ready to let the conversation drift into comfortable territory. She leaned forward, her tone cutting through the laughter. "Hold on, Senator. Let's not get too carried away with these stories," she said with a skeptical smile. "You talk like you discovered something new, but you've been in the Senate for years. Isn't this just more of the same? Where's the real innovation? Are you actually changing lives or just repackaging old policies with a fresh label?" The room quieted as her question sank in. It wasn't just about the program. It was a challenge to Kennedy's entire record, hinting that his charm might be masking a lack of new ideas. Backstage, his team tensed. One aide whispered, "She's going for the jugular." Kennedy's smile remained, though his fingers tapped lightly on the chair's armrest, a subtle sign of irritation. "Joy," he replied evenly, "I think you're more interested in headlines and answers. This isn't about reinventing the wheel. It's about taking what works and bringing it where it's needed most. You can call that old if you like. I call it getting results." The audience applauded again, some cheering in agreement. Behar, unfazed, leaned back and crossed her arms. "Getting results, huh? Senator, you're famous for those folksy one-liners. But that's not leadership." Behar countered sharply. "It's a performance. People want genuine solutions, not the same old playbook dressed up with a southern accent." Her words landed hard, reducing Kennedy's approach to little more than showmanship. The studio fell silent, tension filling the air. Whoopi stepped in, her tone firm. "All right, Joy, let's keep this on the initiative." But Behar waved her off, eyes fixed on Kennedy. "No, Whoopi, I'm asking what everyone's thinking. Senator, when was the last time you took a real risk? Or are you just riding the same horse you've always ridden?" The audience reacted with a collective gasp, sensing the exchange turning sharp. Kennedy's team signaled the producers, but the control room hesitated. Some saw compelling television. Others saw trouble brewing. Kennedy's expression tightened, his voice steady but edged. "Joy, I don't know what's got you so riled up, but you're wrong," he said. "I've spent my career standing up for people who don't have a voice. This initiative is an act. It's about real work for real people. You want bold? Bold is investing in small towns when everyone else has written them off." Applause broke out across the audience. Some even rising to their feet. Behar smiled slightly, her tone turning sarcastic. "Investing in small towns, Senator, that's not bold. That's predictable. You're staying in your comfort zone. People are tired of politicians who rely on charm instead of real innovation. When will you bring something that truly changes the game?" The question hit hard, and the silence that followed was heavy. Sonny Holston tried to steer the discussion back to the funding issue, but her words were drowned out by the tension in the room. Kennedy leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Joy, you're entitled to your opinion, but don't pretend to know my motivations," he said. "I answer to the people of Louisiana, folks who work hard, raise their families, and don't have time for this kind of sparring. You want to talk about vision? My vision is a state where every town has a chance, not just the ones that make headlines. That's who I'm fighting for, not for your approval." The crowd erupted in loud applause, his words cutting cleanly through the moment. Behar's expression hardened, and she shot back. "Oh, please, Senator. You're not fighting for Louisiana. You're fighting for your image. This whole ash routine of yours. It's a brand and it's getting tired." Behar said sharply, "People want leaders who innovate, not ones who recycle the same lines to avoid real issues." The studio fell silent once again. The audience caught between surprise and curiosity. Kennedy's fingers stopped tapping as he straightened in his chair. "Joy, I came here to talk about helping people, not to be your punching bag," he replied, his tone firm but controlled. "But since you keep pressing, let me ask you something. When was the last time you used this platform to actually solve problems instead of creating more? When did you focus on solutions rather than stirring the pot? That's the real evasion here." The crowd gasped, then broke into applause, some even shouting in support. Behar's confident smile faltered, her expression tightening. "Don't try to turn this around on me, Senator," she shot back. "I'm holding you accountable. If you can't take the pressure, maybe you're not ready for the spotlight." Her remark came off as defensive, and the audience reacted with a mix of cheers and boos. Kennedy shook his head, letting out a short, dry laugh. "Accountability, Joy. That's an interesting word coming from someone who prefers controversy over conversation," he said evenly. "I'm here for the people who actually need help, not for boosting your ratings. You want accountability? Maybe start by looking in the mirror." The studio erupted with applause, the audience rising to their feet as the segment reached its peak. Behar tried to respond, but Whoopi quickly intervened. "All right, we're going to take a quick break," she announced, her tone cutting through the noise. The cameras swept across the set, capturing the stunned expressions of the hosts and the energized crowd. The tension lingered in the air as Kennedy leaned back, calm but alert, his eyes sharp and unflinching. Backstage, his team was already in damage control mode. Phones buzzed with alerts as clips of the exchange spread rapidly online. Everyone knew this wasn't a typical interview. It had turned into a defining moment. When the third segment began, the atmosphere was thick with unease. The audience leaned forward, murmuring under their breath as the show's theme music faded. At the table, tension was etched on every face. Whoopi Goldberg clutched her note cards, her composure cracking. Sarah Haynes managed a stiff smile, glancing nervously between Behar and Kennedy, while Sonny Ho sat motionless, her silence louder than words. Senator John Kennedy remained poised in his chair, his navy suit immaculate, his silver hair glinting under the studio lights, but the calm exterior masked a steady determination in his eyes, sharper than before. Behind the scenes, his staff scrambled, phones lighting up as the interview clips dominated social media. It was clear the exchange had gone far beyond what anyone expected. The producers in the control booth were divided, some focused on the chaos, others on the soaring ratings. In the end, they decided to let the segment continue, their headsets buzzing with heated debate. What had started as a routine appearance to promote Senator John Kennedy's Louisiana Community Initiative, a plan to boost small towns through job training and education, had turned into a live confrontation with Joy Behar. And the tension was nearing its limit. Whoopi, trying to regain control, began the next segment with a cautious laugh. "All right, we're back with Senator John Kennedy," she said, her tone strained but steady. "Things have gotten a little heated, so let's refocus. Senator, can you tell us how you're measuring the success of these programs?" It was an attempt to steer the discussion back on track. Kennedy nodded, his familiar Southern drawl calm and deliberate. "Sure thing, Whoopi. We're looking at metrics like job placement, completion rates for training programs, and improvements in school retention. In places like Monroe, we've seen a 20% rise in employment among participants. That's real progress, not just statistics." The audience applauded lightly, a few nodding in agreement. For a brief moment, it seemed the conversation might return to civility. Sunny host leaned forward, her tone composed. "That's encouraging, Senator. How do you make sure these programs reach the communities that need them most?" Kennedy responded thoughtfully, explaining outreach strategies with a touch of humor. He compared his team's approach to knocking on doors like a traveling salesman with a suitcase full of hope. The crowd chuckled, and the mood seemed to ease until Joy Behar cut in. "Come on, Senator," she said sharply, her smile replaced by a cold glare. "Let's not pretend this is some great achievement. A small uptick. That's barely a dent for a state like Louisiana, and you know it. Isn't it time you admit these ideas are outdated? You become a relic, out of touch with what people really need." The audience gasped. The insult hung in the air like a challenge. Backstage, Kennedy's aides exchanged worried glances. One whispered, "She's gone too far." On set, the other host froze, eyes wide as silence settled over the studio. Kennedy's hand tightened around the armrest of his chair, knuckles whitening, but his voice remained calm when he spoke. "Joy, I've been patient," he said evenly. "I came here to talk about real issues, not to be your target practice. But since you made this personal, let's clear a few things up. I've spent my career working for people who don't have the luxury of sitting in a studio tossing out insults for applause. You want to call me a relic? Fine, but this so-called relic is out there every day helping families who need opportunities while you're here turning real work into entertainment." The audience broke into applause, several standing in support. Behar's face flushed, but she pressed on. "Clever words, Senator," she retorted. "But people are tired of politicians like you recycling the same promises. You're not a reformer. You're just another politician, holding on to relevance." The crowd's cheers turned into uneasy murmurs, divided between shock and approval. Kennedy leaned in slightly, his tone sharp but composed. "Joy, you don't understand the people I serve or the work I do," he said firmly. "You sit here pretending to speak for everyday Americans, but all you do is tear down those who try to make a difference. You want to talk about outdated? Try a show that thrives on criticism instead of encouragement. That's the real relic here." The audience erupted, clapping and shouting in support. Behar's confidence wavered as she tried to recover. "Don't lecture me about this show," she snapped, her voice tight. "We ask tough questions. We hold people accountable. If you can't take the heat, maybe politics isn't for you." Her line landed awkwardly, drawing mixed reactions. A few cheers, but more scattered boos. The tension was palpable as Sarah Haynes tried to interject, her voice trembling as she attempted to restore order. Sarah tried to calm the situation. "Okay, let's all take a breath and maybe talk about." But Behar cut her off sharply, her gaze fixed on Kennedy. "No, Sarah, I'm not done," she said firmly. "Senator, you act like you're above criticism, but you're not. People see through this man of the people act, and they're not by it anymore." Kennedy shook his head slightly, letting out a dry chuckle. "Joy, the only thing folks see through is your need to turn every discussion into an argument," he replied, his tone calm but firm. "I came here to talk about hope, about giving people a future. But you're so focused on winning a debate. You've forgotten what an honest conversation sounds like." The audience applauded, their support for Kennedy growing louder. "But Behar didn't back down. Pointing a finger, she raised her voice. A real conversation, Senator. That means facing the truth. And the truth is, your time's up. You're not leading. You're just holding on. The words struck hard. For a brief moment, Kennedy's expression softened, then turned resolute. He stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. I've had enough, he said, his voice steady but final. I came here to discuss something meaningful, not to be insulted by someone who mistakes hostility for honesty. You want to call me outdated? Go ahead. But I won't sit here while you disrespect the people I represent or the work we're doing. This isn't a discussion. It's an ambush, and I'm done playing along. The audience gasped, then erupted into applause. Many stood as Kennedy straightened his jacket, his posture firm and unyielding. Behar opened her mouth to respond, but Kennedy raised his hand, stopping her. I'm not finished, he said, his gaze locked on her. You have a platform, Joy, and you could use it to do real good, to inspire people. Instead, you use it to tear others down, because that's easier than building something meaningful. That's not accountability. That's just mean-spirited. And I'm not here for it. The studio erupted in cheers. The energy electric. Kennedy turned toward the edge of the stage, then paused and looked back at the hosts. I came here out of respect for the show and its audience when he said evenly, but respect goes both ways, and I don't feel here today. I'm leaving not because I can't handle tough questions, but because I have better things to do than argue with someone who'd rather fight than listen. With that, Kennedy walked off the set, his strides deliberate and composed. The audience roared a mix of cheers and stunned gasps while Behar sat frozen, her face tight with shock and frustration. Whoopi quickly stepped in, stammering, we'll be right back after this break. As the cameras panned across the shaken hosts and the buzzing crowd, the producers, now scrambling, signaled for a commercial. But the impact was already made. Kennedy's exit wasn't just a walk-off. It was a statement, one that would ripple far beyond the studio. When the lights dimmed, the tension still lingered. Joy Behar sat stiffly, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Whoopi whispered into her earpiece, trying to regain control, while Sarah Haynes and Sonny Hostin exchanged stunned glances, their coffee mugs untouched. The audience buzzed, some whispering in disbelief, others cheering as phones lit up with clips already spreading online. Backstage, Kennedy's team moved quickly, fielding press calls and preparing for the media storm. In the control booth, producers debated their next move, whether to let Behar respond or pivot to the next segment. What began as a simple interview about Kennedy's Louisiana Community Initiative focused on revitalizing small towns through education and job training had turned into something much larger, a national flash-on about respect, leadership, and the tone of public discourse. As the show returned from break, Whoopi addressed the camera with forced composure. Well, folks, that was something, she said, managing a tense smile. We're going to move on now, but we do want to thank Senator Kennedy for joining us today. The audience murmured. Some clapped. Others sat quietly, still processing what just happened. Behar, visibly unsettled, tried to regain her footing. Look, I was just asking tough questions, she said defensively. That's what we do here. If he can't handle it, that's on him. Her words fell flat, met with scattered applause and a few boos. The crowd was divided. Sarah Haynes tried to steer the conversation back. Let's talk about what the senator's initiative could mean for local communities, because that's important. But her attempt to shift focus fell hollow. The energy from Kennedy's abrupt exit was too strong to overlook. Off camera, producers quickly decided to cut the segment short, moving to a lighter celebrity topic. But the damage was done. Clips of the confrontation spread rapidly online under hashtags like Kennedy Behar, and at the View Showdown, amassing millions of views. Commentators and viewers alike weighed in. Some praised Kennedy for standing up to Behar's tone. Others criticized him for walking out, and many debated Behar's confrontational approach. In the following days, the incident became a national talking point about civility in public discourse. Kennedy, always deliberate in his response, addressed the controversy in a local Louisiana radio interview with his usual calm tone. I didn't go on that show looking for a fight. He said evenly, "I want to talk about helping folks in places like Shreveport and Lake Charles, giving them a fair chance at a better life. But when someone's more focused on tearing you down than listening, there comes a time to say enough. I walked off because I respect myself and the people I serve too much to keep playing that game." Listeners across Louisiana nodded along, many viewing his departure not as weakness, but as a stand for self-respect. Kennedy continued, his tone softening. "I don't hold any grudges. I just hope folks on that show and at home think about how we talk to each other. We can disagree without being disagreeable. That's how we move forward." The interview, later broadcast nationally, drew praise for its steady and thoughtful tone, strengthening Kennedy's image as a grounded, principled public servant. Meanwhile, Behar faced heavy criticism. Social media responses were mixed. Some defended her for asking tough questions, while others accused her of being needlessly hostile. In a later episode of The View, she addressed the issue with a mix of firmness and regret. "I'm not here to make anyone feel small," she said, hand clasped. "But I'm going to ask the hard questions, and sometimes that ruffles feathers. Maybe I push too far, but that's part of the job." Her comments, seen by some as a half apology, did little to quiet the backlash. Ratings dipped as some viewers tuned out in protest. Behind the scenes, producers struggled to contain the fallout. They released a statement reaffirming the show's dedication to open dialogue, while privately urging Behar to adjust her tone in future interviews. The other hosts stayed neutral, with Whoopi later telling a reporter, "It was a tough day, but we learn and move on." Still, the incident lingered, becoming a case study in how easily discussions can spiral when mutual respect is lost. Across media platforms, podcasts, and opinion columns, the debate continued. Kennedy's walk-off wasn't just about one argument. It became a broader reflection on the power of words and the need for civility. For every viewer who admired Kennedy's composure, there was another who valued Behar's insistence on accountability. The moment sparked a larger question: where is the line between accountability and antagonism? Kennedy reflected on this point in a later speech to a Louisiana community group. "Folks, we don't have to agree on everything," he said plainly, "but we've got to treat each other like human beings. You can't build anything worthwhile, a family, a town, or a country, on a foundation of meanness." His sincerity resonated deeply. The incident, once seen as a confrontation, evolved into a teachable moment. Kennedy encouraged people to choose dialogue over division, reminding them that respect is not just politeness. It's essential for real communication. Kennedy's choice to walk away highlighted the value of setting boundaries in the face of hostility. His restraint, both during and after the exchange, showed that standing firm doesn't require hostility in return. For younger audiences watching the viral clips, the lesson was clear: stay true to your principles. Focus on the message, and know when to disengage from a conflict that leads nowhere. The episode also underscored a greater responsibility for anyone with a platform, whether a senator or a host, to use their influence constructively, not destructively. As time passed, the focus shifted from who won the argument to what it revealed. In a world often quick to divide, Kennedy's message about choosing respect over resentment felt strikingly relevant. The story of Kennedy and Behar eventually faded from headlines, but its impact endured. Kennedy returned to his work in Louisiana, where his community initiative gained renewed attention. Towns like Alexandria even reported higher participation in job training programs. Behar and The View moved forward as well, their format unchanged, but their tone more cautious, at least for a time. For audiences, both in studio and at home, the exchange served as a mirror reflecting how we speak, listen, and engage with one another. It wasn't just about politics or personalities. It was about basic humanity. As Kennedy summed it up best, hope is what keeps us moving forward. And hope begins with respect, one conversation at a time.